Hello, everyone, and welcome to A New Direction. My name is Jay Izzo, and oh man, do we have a great show for you today. Listen, you, like all of us, probably have walked into a job and that you just got hired from, and what's the first thing that they do? They tell you the rules. Here's how we do things around here. We do them like this, right? I mean, think about it. Everywhere you go, there is rules, 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 rules. From the time that you can understand rules, we get rules, right? Don't do this. Don't do that. This is not good. Don't eat that. Don't touch this. This is wrong, bad, right? Everywhere we go, we got rules. Now, listen, some rules are absolutely good for us, right? I get it. There are some good rules, don't touch a hot stove. That's a good rule, right? That's a really good rule, right? Don't poke your eye with a fork. Good rule. Good rule. But are all rules necessary? Are all rules equally important? And what has all this rule abiding done for us? Has it made it just fall in line? Has it actually improved our lives? And what has it done for your thinking? Is the way you think based on rules and constructs? Chances are yes. My guest today is Marty Strong, and he is a retired Navy SEAL, incredible entrepreneur, and he wrote this book called Be Different, right? How Navy SEALs and entrepreneurs bend, break, or ignore the rules to get results. And listen, I found this book to be absolutely fantastic, first of all, and it's a great read. And he utilizes his experience in being in SEALs and being an entrepreneur and being a board of directors and all his business experience and brings it all together. And he helps us understand how to create a mindset that we can start breaking these rules that we have in of ourselves. Right. And it's absolutely fantastic. We're going to get to him just a second, and we're going to help you. I promise we're going to help you change that mindset. So before we get started, let's do what we do every week, right? And that is we're a four-part people: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual people. And what we do is we evaluate ourselves every week on a scale of 1 to 10 in each of these areas, 1 being 10 being it can't get any better. And what we want to do is just want to check in and see where we're at and then see where we can grow from. So, for example, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you evaluate yourself physically in terms of like eating right, getting enough exercise, drinking enough water, getting enough sleep, right? 5 being average. What's that number? Now, look, whatever that number is, let's say it's a 3. I don't want you to be alarmed. We're going to treat that as a starting place, right? So how can you take yourself from a 3 to 3.5? If you're a 7, congratulations, good for you. How can we make that maybe from a 7 to 7.25? Because as you know, the higher we go up the scale, right, it gets a little bit more difficult to make those changes, right, to get to that point where we're absolutely fantastic, right? All right, so that's your first number, right? Second number is your mental intellectual number, right? And what I'm asking here is, what are you actively doing to grow in your knowledge and understanding of yourself and the world around you? Whether that's your job, whether that's your relationships, whatever that may be. On a scale of 1 to 10, how active are you? Great way to do this, by the way. Read a book. You want to grow? And then just don't read it or listen to it, because I know a lot of you like listening to books. None of this works if you don't take action on it. So read a book and then take action. Listen to a book, take action. As I tell my coaching clients, you know what? I have no problem with you listening to books, but write down 2 things that you listen to and then take action on those 2 things and tell me what those are. Right? So a scale of 1 to 10, how well are you doing when it comes to your intellectual and mental growth? All right, that's your second number. Third number is your emotional growth. Right, fact of the matter is a lot has been written on emotional intelligence, emotional quotients. Dr. Daniel Goleman has written tons of it. We make it really simple here. 1, how well are you able to control your emotions under stress and pressure? And then secondly, how well are you able to tap into and understand the emotions of other people? Right. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how well would you say you're doing those things? Right. That's your third number. Your fourth number is the spiritual number. And I know people always question the spiritual attributes, but if you remove the physical, the mental, and emotional, everything that we have left is a spiritual, because we do make spiritual connections with things. especially with each other. There's something about another person that we connect with or we don't connect with that we connect our spirits together. The other thing is we all live by faith. Fact of the matter is, this morning you drank your cup of coffee, you believed it wasn't poisonous. You pushed the button on your car, believed that it would start. You saw the crosswalk sign said walk, and you crossed, believing that the cars weren't going to hit you. We all walk by faith on some level. And so then we have this part of us that when we are in the midst of our chaos, in the midst of whatever may be happening, the circumstances, what do we rely on to bring us back to centeredness or even a sense of joy? Is it God? Is it nature? Is it meditation? Is it something else? And is that working for you? And what might you need to do to change it? Those 4 areas are like the air in a tire of your car. If one tire is low, right, the car is difficult to steer. If all 4 tires are low, then what happens is that you're going to ruin the car over the course of time. And speaking of someone who, so we want to bring our tires up the right air. And so someone who does that is, his name is Marty Strong. He's a retired Navy SEAL, combat veteran, CEO, and serves on 2 corporate boards. He is a creativity and leadership consultant, motivational speaker, and author of 9 novels, 3 business leadership books, Be Nimble, Be Visionary, and this one, his latest, Be Different. Listen, he's no stranger to loss. He understands he lost his oldest son. He's beat cancer twice. He's been shot at in a few exotic countries. He spent a lifetime meeting challenges head on and succeeding in 3 professions, anticipating crisis and leading in midst chaos. He's a thought-provoking writer, speaker, and guest expert, and he's got over 350 appearances on national cable TVs and hundreds of radios and podcasts like this one to his credit. So we are so grateful to have him. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show and welcome to the first time, Marty Strong. Marty, welcome to A New Direction.
No, thanks for having me, Jay.
The book, Be Different. I think when you see the title Be Different, one of the first things that, because I have a company called Coaching Mavericks, right? Where I believe that we're all maverick, meaning that we're all unique and different. When you come out of the gate with this book, Be Different, how do you want people to think about being different?
Well, the first thing, all 3 books have the same kind of title on purpose. They're calls to action. So in this case, it's a call to action to think different, and by thinking different, to act, behave differently. And as you mentioned before with the hot stove example, this is more about intellectual difference, intellectual flexibility, intellectual nimbleness, intellectual agility, to allow your mind to kind of roam and learn and be inspired again. And so the point of it is, if you read the book, and everybody's got a different starting point in what I just said, that some people are more open, some people are more closed, some people are more inspired already, some people are very locked into the rules and the regulations and the formulas of life, and professionally or personally. But if at the end of the book, they at least understand what's constrained them that they may not be aware of, the external kind of institutional things that have held them from letting their mind run free like they did when they were 6 or 7 years old, that biologically they're fully capable of doing, that they know that they're fully capable of doing it biologically. This isn't something that diminishes with age and goes away after puberty or something. You still have these capabilities. And third, maybe a little bit about how to apply it, how to actually functionally, once you've understood that you can do these things and kind of reignite these thoughts, how do you apply it in your daily life, or how do you apply it in your professional life?
In your preface, entitled "Disruption is the Law of the Universe," you go back and you talk about your time as a Navy SEAL, which, by the way, thank you for that service. You said being unconventional was a mindset, not a mission category. We were different, but in a good way, a Jedi Knight sort of way. Help us understand what when you say that, what you mean, unconventional mindset and Jedi Knight sort of way.
Well, I've seen the movies and I've read the books growing up, Knights of the Round Table, same type of thing of human beings that come together and they're forged to a single-minded purpose that is good and wholesome and noble, and that their behaviors and the outcomes of their behaviors are positive and highly impactful. And in some cases, maybe, saving the world or saving the nation or saving the city. And and so I was already kind of into that mode psychologically as a 17-year-old when I became a SEAL. What I didn't realize was that there were units like this in the U.S. government, in the military and in the intelligence services that selected and not so much trained, but more selected people for this mindset, for this point of view, kind of a worldview, that they were altruistic by nature, or maybe somebody guided them that way when they were children, but they showed up thinking more about what can I do for other people and what can I do for the greater good. So that's kind of boiled down a lot of times to mission focus, but it's not mission focused like in a Harvard business class that mission focus is to get EBITDA at a certain level. This is more about how do I, save those kids, or how do I, rescue those prisoners, or how do I stop that evil person from doing other evil things? And that's kind of the basic clay that all these special operations units start with, because they select for these altruistic behaviors. One of the things, it's not about me, it's about we. And that's what they're looking for. They don't tell you that saying. They don't teach you that saying. They observe to see if you're living that. And so the selection, when you come in, you think it's about push-ups and it's about running and it's about being cold and all these things. And so you think it's about guts and intestinal fortitude. And it's not. And I spent 2 years later on, 8 years into my career, as the senior enlisted in charge of the phase where Hell Week and all that selection goes on. And I watched that experiment time after time after time, probably 10 or 11 Hell Weeks. And then I got it. The experiment was about setting the circumstances, setting the conditions for them, the students, to show what kind of a person they were, what mattered to them. We can train those people to do anything. We can give them high-speed technical equipment. We can do all that. But we want those people first. And that's essentially, what I was trying to point to.
So really, then it really then comes down to, because it's interesting. I've never heard anyone phrase this the way you did, but it's consistent with what we know about entrepreneurship and business, right? Is that you you're trying to hire to a culture, right? You're trying to sort out who fits into the culture, not necessarily who's the most skilled or the most talented.
Yes, it's a very difficult thing to do. I've been trying to do it ever since I got out of uniform. I know what it looks like and smells like and sounds like. I know what the quack like a duck rule is, and
Right.
trying to get people back to the conditioning thing, professionals, whatever category of technical expertise they represent,
Right.
coming in after 5, 10, 15 years, 20 years of being conditioned to be more self-focused, self-serving, and for good reason, because they've experienced threats to their livelihood, threats to their ascension in an organization. They've been told they aren't smart, or they've been told that their ideas are dumb, and they just need to kind of cap it and comply and wait until they have the tenure that allows them to speak. And that's who you inherit when you go out into the general environment and you put out a job description and you start getting these people to interview.
Right.
And if you're a business, you have to find, if you're missing an accountant, you have to hire an accountant. You can't wait for 3 years before that one accountant comes in that matches that perfect profile that you'd hope for. And I don't even know if that perfect accountant exists out there, because it would be a really strange company that fostered that kind of open-minded thinking and that kind of strong sense of personal confidence and professional confidence, and then allowed them to go into the marketplace to work for somebody else. So it's a hard thing to do, even though I'm aware of it, and most people I have working for me are aware that's what we're trying to strive for.
Well, I think what's interesting is that when you start talking about this idea, is that you're so clear on what the values and the culture is that you're looking for, in as a SEAL. And then we go into business. I wonder if it's because we're not very clear on what our values and culture is. And so maybe we get so focused on hiring talent, we don't hire culture. I guess that's my thought process. Because
Well, you're right. And it's the measure twice, cut once, and what you're
yeah,
measuring is, part of it is the technical match. But technical is also expertise, experience, judgment, all those things that go along with pure technical skill. But the second part is, do you fit into that culture? And I'll tell you what I've dumbed it down to, what I think is achievable. And I had high hopes in the very beginning coming out of uniform. Well, the first thing is it doesn't make any sense that the average person that has a job sees that job the way a Navy SEAL or Green Beret or a Marine Special Ops guy would see the mission of saving somebody's life. They're different scales, they're different things. And so I'm not trying to say that everybody in the commercial world should suddenly act like everything's life and death and they should throw their family's well-being and all that to the side for the corporate objectives. But what I dumbed it down to was kind of what you said in your opening. It's do you care and are you empathetic about other people's needs, other people's issues? And if you're in an organization where you're, say, working on a project and it's a smaller group, say a smaller company or mid-level company, and this project's a big deal for the company, and there are some people that are stuck and it's past 5 o'clock in the evening and there's a deadline. In a company where everybody just walks out the door, walks right past these people that are struggling, goes downstairs, jumps in their car and drives away without even a thought. Those companies are one kind of culture. What I try to get, at least at a minimum, is that everybody's aware that this thing's going on. And what's expected of you is to go over and say, is there some way I can help? Even if it's just, I'll call DoorDash and get you a pizza. Anything, right? Because that simple little act means that you're not alone. And you may be the only person that can fix whatever has to be fixed by the deadline. But maybe you aren't. Maybe other people can chime in. Maybe some other people can take something else off your desk that you're falling behind on because you've got this one problem. That's a different kind of culture, and I think it's an achievable culture and has nothing to do with life and death mission focus or the different outcomes between corporate goals and military goals.
And it's a different way of thinking, I think, for a lot of businesses. And this moves me kind of into chapter 1's introduction. It's called Introduction. And you have this, one of the subheadlines is being an entrepreneur. And I think this is where what you said fits here, is that practice intellectual professional humility by playing the student. Learn everything you can about things you don't know. Seek mentors and champions to emulate and listen to. Walk us through that a little bit about intellectual professional humility and playing the student as we're going about changing the way we think and
Sure.
how we might go about rule breaking or ignoring the rules, etc.
So I'll give you a kind of a quick story related to this. I have a good friend who's a Navy captain, retired submarine commander, Naval Academy guy. And like him, all of us that are in the military, we help people who are getting out of the military, transitioning into the non-military world. And he had coffee with me one morning. And he said, "So what do you say? What's your shtick? What's your elevator speech when somebody comes to you and says, 'What should I do to prepare to get out of uniform?'" And I looked at him and I said, "Well, I had a different one for the first 4 or 5 years, and but I've got more of a scared straight one now." And he goes, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, I basically say, you don't know anything about anything outside, and nobody's going to give you a shot at leveraging all the things you know how to do from the military until you basically know how to bake the bread, whatever the industry is. So you have to apprentice yourself. You have to humble yourself and become an apprentice. You want to own a restaurant? Go in and be a busboy, be a waiter, do the things that you'd have to do to understand the environment. Because coming in and saying, I have money, I want to be a restaurant owner, you're going to fail. If you come into an organization and say, look, I did this for 20 years, I've led this many people, whatever, and you walk in, and I had a test, like EBITDA is a good one, earnings before interest, taxes, and depreciation, whatever. It's a key metric for success financially, right? And I've had colonels, retired colonels, and people like that would come to me, well, I want this. I want a corner office. I want people reporting to me. Who are my direct reports? And I go, hey, I'm willing to give you all that. Just do me one favor. And I walk up on a whiteboard and I put EB, capital. And I said, walk me through what your thoughts are, your philosophies related to that acronym. And they stare at me. And I said, you're just not ready. You need to learn. You need to be an apprentice. I don't care if you were a colonel. And I had a speech at one time called Thank You for Your Service, but it was given to people. It was kind of a snarky thank you for your service. In other words, put the medals away, and that part of your life is over. Learn the new part of your life. And that means you have to have an open mind and you have to start fresh. And I'll say things like, if you're 40 years old and you're a fighter pilot commander of a squadron, How many years is it going to take for you to become a lawyer? How many years is it going to take for you to become an engineer? How many years is it going to take for you to be a software designer? 4 years, 3 years, whatever, 2 years. So you'll be 42 years old or 43 years old. Go for it if that's what you want to do. But you know what? You're going to have to be a student just like everybody else who wants that degree. And you may be in a class with a bunch of 18-year-olds or 24-year-olds, but you're going to end up being a lawyer or an engineer or a software designer at the end of the process. It's all about how you approach it and whether you take yourself, seriously and say, I really want to do something new, and then go back to the way you were when you were in uniform on day one, because nobody gave you that fighter plane 3 days after you got out of boot camp or officers candidate school. Didn't happen that way.
His name is Marty Strong. The book, Be Different, How Navy SEALs and Entrepreneurs Bend, Break, or Ignore the Rules to Get Results. We're just getting started here, but boy, it's good already. You're listening to him here on A New Direction. Hey, everybody, listen, Epic Physical Therapy, whether you're recovering from an injury, surgery, suffering everyday aches and pains, having difficulty performing activities of daily living, maybe you're a professional athlete and you just want to just move better. Listen, the elite team at Epic Physical Therapy will provide you with a customized treatment plan specifically for you. So when you're ready for your epic relief, epic recovery, epic results, don't look any further. Go to epicpt.com. And Linda Craft Team Realtors for more than 39 years. They've been helping people all over the world transition in life. And you go, wait, I thought they were a real estate company. What do they have to do with life transition? Think about it. Every place you've ever lived has been a life transition, and they know how to take the stress out of that portion, out of that life transition. They would love to help you. They've been doing it successfully for thousands of people. So check them out. It's lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with Marty Strong, the book, Be Different, How Navy SEALs and Entrepreneurs Bend, Break, or Ignore the Rules and to Get Results. Getting started here. Marty, chapter 2 is entitled Stability is an Illusion. And you point out something called the stability imperative. Innovative thinking that tends to incite change is perceived by many as destructive. And you say, that's right, it's a threat. Why is that, Marty?
I think all human beings, by nature and by the design of our brains, believe that safety and security is a primary objective. Whether you consciously think about it or not, it is part of our primal wiring. The urge to explore and take risk is usually a result of the stability or the safety being impaired by something. You're in a valley and you run out of food. If you don't go to the next valley, you're just going to starve. So you have to take the chance and go to some strange new place over the hill, over the ridge, and see what you can see, and hopefully you find what you need. And if you do, you settle out, you stabilize again, and that's just kind of the way the human mind works. And it's really not that much more complicated than that. You can make it more complicated and say that people dig into their intellectual, foxholes and all those kinds of things. But in reality, people like safety and stability. People like things to be normal. And what happens after that, unfortunately, is people get invested in that status quo. They get invested in that status quo intellectually, sometimes falsely, but they think it's intellectual, and emotionally. So to try to blow them out of that position takes a lot more effort than just simple logic or something that refutes what they believe in. You really have to kind of come at it at a lot of different angles. So I say stability is an illusion, and it's kind of back to the concept of the universe doesn't stand still. Everything is changing, every molecule, every atom, everything is in motion, everything is adjusting, changing, adapting, morphing, evolving, de-evolving. That's the reality of the universe. And to think that stasis is the way to go means that you're out of sync with the universe. You can be out of sync with the universe for a little bit of time, for a little while, but given enough time, whether you are investing in the markets or you've got a profession that's trending out of favor, in an industry that might be trending out of favor or waning because of some new leapfrog of technology or application of some other process or methodology, if you're not paying attention, you're just going to be left realizing the world changed while you were hoping it didn't. So it's an awareness thing. You got to understand it. It's not that I want to create instability everywhere. I think everybody should be running around trying to break up everything that seems to be solid and sound. But you have to realize that it's a moment in time, and there are a lot of factors. And in competition in business, I mean, every morning somebody around you is waking up wondering how they're going to take and eat your lunch.
Yeah.
Whether you believe it or not, they are, because they want to win. They want to survive. They want to grow. They want their business to thrive. And if your business is stable, you get into this apathy mode, which is related to all the things I just said.
Chapter 3, I'm going to turn it into a question, not a statement. Okay. So, how does obedience impair innovation? Because the title is how obedience impairs innovation. I'm going to ask it as a question. How does obedience impair innovation?
Yeah. So, I mean, I use obedience and compliance and conformity kind of interchangeably in the book and in my speeches. So, obedience is not a bad thing. If you want everybody to survive a plane crash and you want them all to get to where the doors open and there's a slide, to be obedient in that scenario means your life will be saved. That's a good thing, right? So I think we come back to the intellectual application of the word. So the way obedience can deter or deflect or actually defeat innovative thinking or innovative impulses is that you're told to think and do and act the way. And if you buy into that, even if you have a voluntary or involuntary impulse to be creative or have a creative thought or an innovative thought, and everybody has these things, and a lot of times they'll have it and they'll go, oh, that's a dumb idea. Nobody will believe that, or I'm never going to say that out loud. Or I mean, we all come up with song lyrics and book titles and stuff. They pop into our head because we're human beings and we're bombarded with so much information. Our brains taking it and just throwing it around and throwing it all up on the wall and saying, what's that look like? And we are actually rejecting these creative and innovative impulses as a mechanical reaction because it's not aligned with what we've been told to think, to do, to act, or even how to think about things like that. To us, that's a distortion of thought. That's not an illumination of thought. So that's kind of where I was coming from with that particular title.
Well, I think it's interesting because you started out that chapter with how cancel culture, which we generally attach to politics, but it's in our workplaces where if we have an idea or we have a thought that may be incongruent, dare I say it that way, that we can all of a sudden be shut down or ridiculed or silenced because we express an opinion that might be opposing. And it's when we have that, it's actually when people try to cancel us, it's a form of forced obedience. I want you to obey what I want you to do. And we're under, I believe, in this world, I believe we're under that pressure a lot. Do I have that right?
Yes, it's a 360-degree zone of influence that's negative in this case. So if your boss tells you in a meeting that the idea doesn't make any sense, so don't bring it up again, the peers at that meeting are looking at you because now you're shaking and rattling the boat, you're shaking the cage, and you're interfering with the normal flow of things, and now you're a little bit of a threat. And so now they're trying to think of how do we keep him from opening his mouth again and bring that up again, because what he just said could actually, my whole department could go away, or the people in my department could suddenly not look as valuable in my department, and he'll end up needing more resources. The people that work for the person that opened his mouth will get the word that their boss is now kind of in this kind of I call it this kind of shade of gray, where they're not sure he has any influence anymore. She doesn't have any influence anymore, or she's suspect because she was kind of dressed down by the boss. And then all of a sudden, it all starts to swirl around. The poor person that came up with the idea doesn't realize that the boss has an influence, the peers are having influence on him, and even the subordinates and direct reports within a week or so, and they're all trying to influence him to not do it again.
Right.
There's very few people that hear that and walk up to him and go, "Hey, that's a great idea. Let's join at the hip here, and if we go down in flames, so be it." That doesn't happen very often. It's
Yeah.
usually the other thing. It's kind of an emotional protective conspiracy of the social group within the organization to stem the different trend and to kind of cap it right there, stop it.
Yeah. I've had it happen at a corporate level. Years ago, I had it happen where I got labeled a loose cannon for my ideas, right? And I would voluntarily bring them up, right? And then was chastised um, incessantly about these ideas because they were not within convention. So and this is years ago. So I mean,
Mhm.
I can't even imagine what it is today. I'm sure that there are people in there who are, and I got beat up. I felt beat up. I'm not going to lie to you. I felt beat up by it. I mean, it was hard to continue to do your job when, you're getting written up and you're getting told, these are ideas we don't want to hear, right? And you're like going, yeah, but it's not a bad idea. I mean, it wasn't like they were horrible ideas. It wasn't like it was hurtful ideas, right? I mean, it was just that they didn't like the idea,
Yeah.
and it was very hard. I'll never forget. It was very hard, and it was very difficult, and it wound up, being one of the reasons why I was like, okay, I got to change careers. I think at the end of the day,
The other thing that can happen, which has happened to me too, is the senior leader can say, that's a great idea.
mm,
And I want to hear more about that idea.
right?
And why don't you come talk to me about that idea? And then the meeting's over and they walk out and everybody else says, that's a dumb idea. We hate that idea. And they start figuring out a way to kill the idea. And meanwhile, you're a pariah because you came up with an idea.
Yes,
So it's human beings, right? All interacting, kind of a tribal thing and all that. But the end result for the purpose of this discussion is to tamp down free thought, free speech,
right.
openness, openness and communication, exchange of information, um, exchanging it and relating in ways that are, asymmetrical and atypical and abnormal. So it's all laying out there on the table, and then you go ahead and you sift through it, and you go, you kind of work your way through what can actually be accomplished. But to not even engage in any of that means you're leaving all of that off the table. You're not thinking about anything other than the channeled information that you're getting. And if you're a boss and you're relying on information, that's real dangerous. Whether you're in the military and you just want to hear the one intelligence report that's telling you everything's great or everything's terrible, history's filled with those kinds of things where the leader thought that the army was 10 times bigger than they were and they weren't. Or the other way around. The army was 10 times smaller, or the general was incompetent. And so, okay, I want to believe that, and wasn't listening to other people saying, no, really, they're pretty good, and there's actually more people that, and it happens all the time. It's human nature. So you've got to, as they said in the military, keep your head on a swivel intellectually, gather in 360 degrees of information, constantly be on the hunt for new ideas, inspirations from different angles, and that's all about the only way you can prepare yourself and inoculate yourself, because the unknown is the unknown. You're never going to know everything.
Well, and it stifles, and if we let it, it will stifle our thought, which brings us even more to chapter 5, which is how conditioning inhibits free thought. And you talk about how our personal history not only affects our self-esteem, but it affects the way we think. So talk to us about some of the baggage that we carry in with our own conditioning that inhibits our ability to be different when it comes to our thinking.
Well, this goes back, and I gave a speech at the Houston Space Center earlier this year to a bunch of educators about this book. And I didn't realize that the group was going to be mostly educators. And as you've read the books, you know that conformity, obedience, and all the things that we're talking about are institutional, and it starts at a young age, and it starts that's not just me, but there's been a lot of research about why the creativity scores diminish over time, and they keep pointing to institutional schools. You aren't supposed to learn how to think informally. You're supposed to learn how to think formally. You're supposed to study and learn what has happened. You're not supposed to contemplate what might happen. You're supposed to learn not how to think so much, but memorize what everybody else has already thought about. I don't care what it is. If it's engineering, mathematics, medicine, you pick any topic, high school, middle school, high school, college, it's a history lesson. Every single subject is a history lesson. So if you're going to do well, the first thing you're taught is to get along is to go along.
Mm.
If you disagree with it, you're not going to do well. And if you don't do well, you're either going to get kicked out of school or you won't get into a college, or if you don't do well in college, you're not going to get a job. So the institutions and the social kind of structure says these are the steps to success. It's very linear, right? Which is not the way the real anybody like an Elon, anybody you pick, including me, anybody you pick that's really successful if they lay out the path of their life, it is all over the place, right?
Right.
So there's a few people that have went from the best grades to the best schools to the best jobs and then retired. But that's not as normal as the theology of our systems tries to sell us on. So you get to a point where, and you mentioned earlier about, when your first job, people tell you what to do, where to go, what cubicle to sit in, what floor you can't go on, what area you can't park at, all those things. And you don't have that much of a problem with it because you just went through 12 years of education and maybe 4 years of college, and your parents, and maybe theologians if you were in a religious system, and all the peer pressure of your friends who are coming from the same influences, who are telling you you're never going to be a rock star, you're never going to be an Olympic skier, you're never going to, so stop talking about it, that's stupid, they ridicule you every time you bring something up. So you can't win for losing unless you just have some passionate force of will that you break out of that. And then again, if you look at all the great musicians, you look at the great artists and look at their life story, that's what they did early on. That's how they ended up being what they were, because they got out of that kind of rat race, that kind of track. So you've got all this going for you or going against you. And you got through your first job, and your first job isn't any different than your second job. And do you want to move up the ladder? Well, you don't move up the ladder by doing what we said earlier. You don't move up the ladder by raising your hand in meetings and coming up with crazy ideas that everybody hates. You move up the ladder by being quiet. You move up the ladder by doing what you're told to do, and essentially you're right in the same system as you were in education. Get a good enough grade on the projects and the things that you've been asked to do, to not get fired, to get promoted, and to keep moving. And unfortunately, if you do that, which is kind of into the leadership thing, you might make it to the top of the org chart, and that day somebody will look at you and say, you're in charge, and you don't know how to lead, you don't know how to think, you don't know how to make judgments, you have no wisdom. You're a product of all of that. Which and all this creativity, innovation, all these things, being different and thinking different is absolutely required if you're going to be a leader. So that's the baggage. That's what you've got. And it is baggage. And baggage isn't a part of your biology. Baggage can be tossed off to the side and left behind on the curb. You can get rid of this and shred this stuff. You just have to be aware of it first, and then start working at how to kind of acknowledge it and then move away from it.
Chapter 7 is called Revolutionary Thinking. And you have these 3 steps to revolutionary thinking: intellectual humility, intellectual curiosity, and intellectual creativity. Talk to us about revolutionary thinking and help us get there with these 3 steps.
So we talked about intellectual humility earlier. I think that's kind of the foundation for the other 2 steps. If you can't bring yourself to cast aside your recent victories and cast aside your recent defeats, you're really not going to have an open mind. You're not going to have a clear mind. And it's just as important that you do both of those things. You can't walk into the moment when the challenge is laid out, whatever the issue is, whatever the problem set is. You can't walk into that saying, well, I just got a huge bonus. I've just won 3 contracts in a row. I am, riding high, and I'm just going to do this problem, whatever it is, the way I feel like doing it. I'm not really going to look into it. I'm not going to ask a lot of questions. And maybe I'm going to apply the same formula I've applied for the last 2 years. Why mess with success? That's an arrogant point of view, which also closes your mind to any kind of information. If the world has decided to pivot 15 degrees to the right, you're going to miss it. And it's going to be a bigger fall from grace because of it. On the other side, you just got a divorce, something bad happened, you wrecked your car, all those kinds of things. You can't walk into the situation with a complete lack of confidence. You can't come into a situation and say, I have no judgment, I have no wisdom, I have no capacity to take in information, because that's debilitating. So what I'm asking for isn't actually impossible. You have to practice it. And I tell people to practice it on the small things, not just the huge projects and the huge, crises. Practice it every day, because your first impulse is to say whatever comes out of your mouth, and it's usually whatever you did yesterday and last week. So stop the first impulse, and instead of saying something, ask a question. And especially ask a question about something you absolutely know nothing about. And that starts you down a trail of humility. And it's intellectual humility, because what you're doing is you're allowing your your intellect to start soaking up other information, other data points. And the broader you make that search, the richer those data points are going to be. And we already talked about what you do with that. So the second step is, so you've done that. You've got all this information, you've got all this input, insight, inspiration, whatever it is. Well, what are you going to do with it? Well, now you have to have intellectual curiosity. You have to say, I'm going to go ahead and play with this. I'm going to experiment. Experimentation is huge in creativity, and it's not really given much value in business for sure. Experimentation is expensive, just like investment is expensive. Investment is a bit of an experiment because you think, if I spend this much money on a new factory or a new system or new process or software or training people, I'm going to get some kind of big benefit from it. And sometimes it doesn't pan out. So you have to have intellectual curiosity to allow you to kind of play with the information that you have against the challenges that you're looking to deal with. And then lastly, you're kind of positioned for the last piece, and that's the intellectual creativity. You can be intellectually creative. You can actually construct. This is the constructive phase. You can actually build. You can actually, construct a solution. And you're doing it from the best point of view you can possibly come up with because you've gone through the other steps. It doesn't mean it's going to be the perfect answer. It doesn't mean it's the only answer, but you've at least done everything you can do within your means to get to a constructive, creative outcome. And then you sit back, and if that doesn't work, you start all over again. Or if it works for 6 months or a year, and suddenly it's not working because the world's changed, revert back to intellectual humility and start all over again.
That's beautiful. His name is Marty Strong. Be different. How Navy SEALs and entrepreneurs bend, break, or ignore the rules to get results. Really, really good stuff. You're listening to him here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, Epic Physical Therapy, their facility offers the most advanced top-of-the-line equipment, including the Ultra G anti-gravity treadmill, the Normatec compression sleeves, Game Ready. That's just name a few. They are certified most comprehensive cutting-edge treatments available, like blood flow, restriction therapy, dry needling, cupping, and that's just a few. Listen when you're ready for your epic relief, your epic recovery, epic results. Don't look any further. Go to epicpt.com. It's EPICPT.com. And Linda Craft Team Realtors. Hey, listen, check out their website, lindacraft.com. Got to tell you, it is one of the most comprehensive real estate websites you will ever see. You want to find homes for sale, they've got it. You want to find best vendors that you should be using to help you with your home, they've got it. Listen, you want to join their team, they got it right there. It is by far the most comprehensive website you'll ever see, and they can help you regardless of where you live. Check them out. It's lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with my friend Marty Strong. I think I can call you friend. Can I call you friend? Is it okay if I call you friend? Okay. Be different. How Navy SEALs and entrepreneurs bend, break, or ignore the rules to get results. So good. I'm going to stay here in chapter 7 for just a second here, because you say something that I just think is too important to ignore. You said, like addicts, it's a significant emotional breakthrough to admit there's a problem. And that addiction is adherence to silly rules, outdated procedures, defunct processes, and flawed systems and worn out traditions. Talk to us about our addiction.
Well, we've been describing a lot of the symptoms in this discussion, and I think that makes it relatable to a lot of people because they understand that addiction is a behavior, and it's a behavior that is learned, and then that can trap them into a negative spiral, and that it's also something that can be contravened. You can intervene. You can change those behaviors. You can moderate those behaviors until those behaviors are either mitigated to enough of an extent or completely eliminated to where the addiction is gone. And so that's kind of the illusion, or the illusion I'm trying to make here. The things that are holding you back, the thought processes that you're having, the timidity, the concern about upsetting the apple cart, about not doing exactly what everybody else is doing, not doing what everybody's doing socially, professionally, whatever, not following every single solitary rule. There's a great Walter Isaacson's book, Elon. There's a section in there about Elon coming down, and he's asking, well, why are we doing this thing with the Tesla? Why is the Tesla so heavy? And well, there was this big battery at the base of the Tesla, and there was this big tray with a rubber pad between the battery and the bottom of the car. And he said, well, why do we have that thing there? It's taking us this much time to put it in there. It's slowing down production, and it's expensive. And they said, because that's what we have to do. Well, why do we have to do it that way? Because that's the way the guys in Detroit were doing it when they were designing electric cars. And he goes, well, what's the problem? He says, well, there's a noise thing and the battery's going to rattle and all this other stuff. And he goes, well, let's do this. Let's take a Tesla, let's take it into a sound chamber, and let's take one without the pad, this expensive pad that takes so long to put in there, and let's take that in there and let's see what the decibel difference is. And it was so minute, it wouldn't have been registered on, a hound dog's ear, let alone a human ear. And so he eliminated the pad, and he eliminated the cost, and he eliminated the time delay. It was a silly rule. And he also, a lot of things with SpaceX, he found that a lot of the rules were coming from NASA because he was hiring engineers who were space engineers, and they almost all worked at NASA, and they couldn't explain when he said, where did the rule come from? They're like, well, it's just a rule. To me, that's the definition of a silly rule until it's proven otherwise. I think that's the right process, because rules that are silly eventually become traditions. And a tradition is something to me that seems sacrosanct at first blush. It's usually part of onboarding training in companies, et cetera, in the military and everything else. But at some point, somebody goes, why are we doing that? Well, we've always done it that way. And if you hear that, then you're probably in the silly rule realm, and it's probably worth looking at, especially if you're a new leader and you're trying to figure out a way to clean things up and tighten things up and accelerate the organization.
It's so true. And in chapter 12, you have a title called Architect of Change. And you said before you can become an architect of change, you must change. And you give us some elements of making the change, and you talk about ways of thinking differently. Give us some of those elements that we need to do in order to start making these changes in our thinking.
I believe in building things and not necessarily destroying things. I think I use the word or the term architect because I think, and this kind of goes to the leadership role, not all leaders understand the holistic nature of leadership. And it's also convoluted with business B schools definitions of management as, the same as leadership. To me, leaders are people that manage systems and processes and people who are behaving according to their resume. And if any of that gets a little bit off kilter, they go to a guidebook, an instruction book, or they just replace the person. They manage it. A leader is somebody when the entire supply chain shuts down, or the one resource to make the product that you're making suddenly goes 3 times up in price. It's a crisis. It's a problem. No guidebook is going to help you manage your way through it. You basically have to come into a room and rethink and reinvent. So you don't want to have leadership scenarios all the time because that would be nonstop crisis. And you don't want to create crisis just because you're really good at leading, which I've seen that too. And you don't want to be a manager who doesn't understand how to lead when things are going off the rails. So the way to kind of handle all of these different scenarios is to come into the role of leadership to be an architect first and an engineer second. An architect is the one that designs first the concept, the vision. The vision gets converted into some kind of conceptual reality. The conceptual reality gets converted into some kind of a schematic, a draft design on paper of some sort of plan. Once it's a plan and the plan looks like it's sound and all the elements look like it all make sense, then you need somebody to build the plan. You need an engineer. And the first part is a leadership role. The second part is maybe a little less leadership and a little bit more management. But if the leader doesn't keep the ball rolling and keep the engineering project moving towards the intended purpose to design, as it was designed by the architect, it will go off, it'll stray off in different directions, and you never achieve what you want to achieve. Now, that's a great analogy, but it's for, changing human behaviors in an organization, whatever it is, whether it's business or not, even the military. Changing, physical issues like production lines and changing the nature of an entire business. If you have to, like after after COVID in 2020, those companies that came out of that, just like the ones that came out of 2008 with the the Great Recession, those that came out of World War II, those that came out of 1929 with the Great Crash. The ones that really thrived are the ones that completely reinvented themselves based on the new normal and the layout of the environment. They sat back, they re-envisioned the world, they re-envisioned themselves in that world, they redesigned the company, they built the company they'd redesigned, and then they executed. And those companies thrived for the next 30 or 40 years. And the ones that didn't do that, the ones that sat back and just pretended that this was all going to go away pretty soon, ended up either going away or they were acquired by these rising new leaders.
I I'm going to jump ahead here to chapter 17 because we're running out of time. It's called Divergent Thought Leadership. And you say if you seek to be different and you accept the premise that to be different, you must think differently, then you're already 10 steps ahead down the path to intellectual creativity. You say it's nice to be called a thought leader, but it only takes a few minutes of research that or be a true mental maven to feel humbled by comparison. Humility is good. We've talked about that. But not everybody's a thought leader. Talk about divergent thought leadership in general and why it's important for us to have divergent thought leadership.
Well, first off, I think that the term thought leadership has been cheapened. I think there are true thought leaders in history, and we probably, if we've spent 10 minutes, we could probably come up with more than a handful that everybody would agree moved the needle of humankind in some way, form, or fashion. And so, I'm not trying to badmouth influencers, which tend to try to say that they're thought leaders. I think that if you're a divergent thinker, and it's kind of back to what we just talked about, a divergent thinker would be very valuable in the architectural stage and in the design stage, the conceptual visualization stage. But the convergent thinker, the logical linear construct kind of thinker, is extremely valuable in the engineering build phase. Because if you had one doing the other, you'd have kind of a clunky linear design that may not get where you need to go. Or you'd have, somebody trying to build something and it'd be falling apart because they change the plan every 5 minutes. So I think there's a value to both. And I think being a divergent thinker as a rule makes you exceptional. It makes you different because I think society, education, families, we've all pumped out a lot of employees and a lot of linear thinkers and a lot of convergent, dynamic convergent professionals. They're really good at building the thing straightforward. What they're not really good at is designing the plan and designing the plan based on what they know now, but even more so, what's going to happen in 5 years or 10 years? We aren't building highways. We aren't building airports for 10 years from now. That kind of fell back. It's all kind of gone away. And, the subtitle of my second book, Be Visionary, is Strategic Leadership in the Age of Optimization. I make the point that we've lost this whole point of looking forward and investing forward and envisioning and being creative and designing for the future. What we're doing is we're optimizing based on micro measurement and analysis of the past. It's all rearview mirror thinking because we can't, because it's there and nobody can challenge us because it's countable. So I think that's the value of divergent thought. I think that's why it's a unique skill and a worthy goal if you want to make a difference in the world.
We've done our time. You've been absolutely magnificent. I mean, the book's magnificent. You've been absolutely fabulous too, as well. Tell people how they can get a hold of you and learn more about what you're doing, or maybe hey, so listen, I know you're speaking all over, but you probably wouldn't mind getting a few more speaking gigs too.
Yeah, I love doing that. It's great. I do a lot during the year, and you just go to martystrong.com. I've got a site that covers my books and covers my speaking work, and has access to my novels. It's all right there. martystrong.com. I'm on Amazon, so it's easy to find there too.
Great. Yeah. No, he would listen, folks. Great stuff. I'm going to tell you, we didn't even talk about. He's got all these other novels that he's written. He just does it so much. He's got his fingers in so many things. It's really, really cool. But I got to tell you, Be Different is really, really great. You need to change your thinking. We need this in the world today. We need to be thinking different, and this book does it for sure. Marty, thank you. Stay with me. Folks, this is a show, you know what I say to you every week. First of all, you had a lot of choices. You chose us. Thank you for doing that. Give us a 5-star review wherever you listen to the show, and a thumbs up on YouTube if you're watching us there. I want to remind you that you are in control of three things: your attitude, your effort, and your resiliency. The fact of the matter is, life is going to give you all sorts of things, but how we respond to it is our choice. You always have a choice in your attitude, and it can be positive. I know it can be tough and it can be difficult, but you do have a choice to maintain a positive attitude. And your effort is tied to your excellence. And you make the choice of how excellent you're going to be today. That's up to you. And then finally, resiliency. Listen, we all get punched in the gut or knocked in the teeth, but it's up to you to get back up. Make that choice. Get back up because you're worth it. I promise you, you are. We're going to be back next week with another great guest. It's going to be another great book. And I promise you it's going to be another great show. As I say to you all over the world, it is this. Ciao, everybody.